Love Story Season 1, Episode 4 Review. I Love You. Guys, this is where I began. By author Carissa Pavlika. Like so many others, I often look side-eyed at nepo babies, who seemingly don't have to work as hard to achieve their dreams when others struggle. But with every advantage comes a disadvantage. And when you were born into a family on which the public makes demands for time, access, and what being in their presence can do for them, you begin life saddled with a burden you didn't request. I Love You follows the beginning of John and Carolyn's love, when they finally let their fears rest and commit to discovering what this really is. Love Story Season 1, Episode 4 is much simpler than those that made up the premiere. It's more intimate, both in the way John and Carolyn are as a couple and in what they share of their lives. It also reveals just how publicity-averse Carolyn was even before she met John. I loved how they showed how much she valued her privacy and how she took it for granted when she managed to breeze past the paparazzi coming out of a Calvin Klein event to meet John on the down low. She was both hyper-aware of his public image and of how people and paparazzi, the photo seagulls she called them, were drawn to him, and quite certain it was the life for her. Yet there was no doubt she was drawn to John in spite of the dangers associated with being in his orbit. John, admittedly loving his life of privilege, happy that the world waved him through and gave him free passes after his mistakes, was beginning to mature after the loss of his mother. He was thinking as broadly, narrowing his focus. He was making headway with his magazine, George, and he brought Carolyn into his circle. He sensed there was more to her than other women he'd dated, but even his newfound maturity could change him overnight. It began well enough. A drink with his friends, some of whom think she's just another grifter, but with a better plan, and at least one who recognized Carolyn as someone influential in John's life and worthy of his attention. But then he decided to take her to meet his sister. It was a party, so there wouldn't be much pressure, he assured her. That seemed like a logical next step until they arrived at a dinner party for Caroline's birthday, which was not at all what Carolyn expected. Even worse, John did tell Caroline, who offered a rather icy reception to Carolyn, who was already cringing at the awkwardness of her appearance. But John and Caroline were close enough that they talked it through a bit, enough to salvage the evening for Carolyn and to give Caroline a better sense of the new woman in John's life. And just when things seemed to be going swimmingly, John's friend left a note for him, unrequested and without being honest about it, detailing things about Carolyn he believed John needed to know. For anyone else in the world, they might take such a missive with a grain of salt. After all, John was already aware that some people in his life were there because he was a Kennedy by birth, not because of who he really was. But that, also the very same reason that John felt like he'd been hit by a Mack truck at the idea of Carolyn pursuing him, being obsessed with him, and even leveraging Calvin to introduce them so she could be near him. Needless to say, it sucked the wind out of his sails. He went from being certain they were right for each other to believing the worst in her, and her history led her to slam the door in his face again. When he believed the worst in her eyes, his shine wore off. She had rarely spoken about her father, but it was because of the pain she felt at his absence. The man she thought she knew wasn't her hero anymore, and maybe John was no different. Their backgrounds were so different that things shouldn't have worked. Thanks to his sister's counsel, among other things, they ultimately did. It was Caroline who pointed out to John what a terrible idea it was to share the letter with Carolyn, especially without giving himself time to consider all the possibilities. She also reminded him that if he's got friends like the one who delivered the letter, he may be keeping the wrong company. I could have been the only one who found his friend group questionable. They seemed to want to one-up him, and who could blame them? To walk in his shadow required a lot of confidence, lest someone disappeared due to John's light shining so bright. John wanted to believe he was normal. Everything about him fought against being anything but. From riding his bike along the NYC streets to walking headfirst into throngs of paparazzi rather than avoiding them. He used it as his superpower. If he didn't fall for the circus that played around him, then it was real. But it was real, and the public did make demands on him, and even people he thought were friends were anything but. As much as you can feel for his need for normalcy, you also wish he had understood a little earlier that he was abnormal, but in a lovely way. He opened his arms to the public, hoping it would make him normal. Instead, it gave people rights they did to deserve and trust they hadn't earned. Yet, like I said at the opening of this article, even I look side-eyed at people born into majesty, for lack of a better word. It's sometimes easier to cast aspersions than to show empathy, and I do have compassion for people born in the public eye. It wouldn't be easy. But life is easy for any of us. It's just different. Once John wrapped his head around this, He was free to push harder for Carolyn, to welcome her back into his circle of trust, and promise to be better for her, because she deserved it. This is where I begin, was one of the most romantic things anyone could say. That someone trusts their love for you and yours for them enough to begin a new chapter speaks volumes. But again, John is teen normal. And at that point, Carolyn barely understood the challenges ahead. If she had, she might have walked away. Carolyn was empathetic toward Kate Moss's newfound celebrity, and the reasons she would be irate under constant scrutiny. Calvin, not so much. He thought the trade-offs for fame were worth the risk. However, we shall soon see whether he feels the same when it's his own celebrity that's in question. Carolyn's relationship with John will put her in the spotlight, which could threaten Calvin's own, given their working relationship. And we already know that how the media perceives a man in the public eye is much different than how they perceive a woman. Carolyn is already on tenterhooks, worrying about the scrutiny. She's going to curl up into herself, and I can think of anything worse than a media used to dealing with John's jovial presence. And the shit is about to hit the fan. The credits rolled on the first photos of John and Carolyn together. Love Story Season 1, Episode 5 will take us to the point where Carolyn's life changes forever. Even the thought of it makes me a little anxious. I truly cannot imagine how she felt to be thrust into the spotlight. It will obviously affect her deeply, as the warm, generous woman we are getting to know on screen, and who friends and family recall fondly disappeared, replaced by a standoffish, icy demeanor. It breaks my heart to imagine where their love might have taken them if they'd been afforded more privacy, especially when you consider how much they enjoyed each other without the limelight. Repeating it multiple times on the show might seem like overkill, until you consider the enormity of what they were getting into. We cannot let another hour go by without referencing the music again, because oh my gosh, it is perfection. Every song has purpose and mood, from Madonna's Secret to The Cranberries' Linger. Each note speaks perfectly to a moment of their relationship. Too often, musical rights are ignored, but what they bring to a production like this cannot be overstated. It's worth every cent. There isn't anything else you can use on screen to convey a moment like you can with music. Music takes you places. You can be in your living room one moment, and with the first notes of a song, be transported to another place and time. I wish all productions were as purposeful in their choices and cognizant of their importance long after the rights expire. And I especially wish they were all as willing to dig into the deep well of musical choices available rather than scratching the surface with top 10 lists. There's a note to be shared with shows like China Beach and movies like 16 Candles, which, for whatever reason, were unable to secure rights to the music that added so much emotional context to their stories. To Hollywood and musicians, secure the rights. Offer a discount to keep your music alive and associated with a seminal work. Do whatever you can from every side to ensure that the full picture remains intact. It matters. Yes, I saw Constance Zimmer as Carolyn's mother. That woman is a marvel. She can blend into any show and become a part of its canvas. We've got a lot more to say about her in an upcoming episode. And with that, it's over to you. Are you enjoying the story so far? Are you falling head over heels with this cosmic and doomed love? Share your thoughts with me about Love Story, John F. Kennedy Jr., and Carolyn Bessette in the comments below. No account? Register here, forgot password for TV Fanatics' 20th anniversary and Valentine's Day. We were celebrating with the best younger couples from the past 20 years. The Pit delivered a tragically angsty love story in under an hour, and we still can't stop thinking about it. Here's why. Some TV couples have IT, and we're talking about that chemistry that lights up the screen. We're chatting about 2025's hottest couples here. Posted on Published, February 19th. 2026 TV Fanatics owner and editor-in-chief has a background in HR and office management. Carissa pivoted careers in 2009 when her love of TV and writing converged. She's written for many TV and entertainment sites, including She Knows, EW as a contributor, TV Overmind, Click Clack, and Collider. Before, more categories reviews.